Welcome to the Shockwave Therapy Podcast. My name is James Woolidge, osteopath and clinical director at the Abbeyfields Clinic in Suffolk. We will be trying to demystify the concept of shockwave treatment whilst bringing together experts in their field to discuss the latest research. If you are deciding on whether to add this modality into your clinic or just improve the way you deliver it, then we hope this is the podcast for you. Welcome to episode 1. I'm joined today by Paul Hobrough, the author of Running Free of Injuries. He's a clinic owner and excellent physiotherapist up at physioandtherapy.co.uk. He also teaches in this country and around the world on behalf of one of the major shockwave manufacturers. He teaches his own postgraduate CPD courses on this subject as well. So there are not many people around that know more about shockwave therapy than him. So we're really pleased to have him open up our first episode today. Welcome, Paul. Paul, we've got 15 minutes tonight just to try and simplify a few things to do with what shockwave therapy is. So when you're teaching your courses, can you just outline for the people that don't know much about it what you kind of say about what shockwave is and how it works?
Yeah, no problem. And the first things first is that this is a way of explaining to your patient, so I think it's more important. You can go and read all the sciencey stuff. So you've got to perfect your 60-second pitch. So what you're looking at is that shockwave is going to give you a pressure wave and an acoustic wave together. That's what makes it so brilliant. And what that's going to do is that first pressure wave, which is the shockwave, is going to be followed by cavitation bubbles which expand and collapse. And then you've got microjets that come through and they also hit the affected tissues. So though you're giving 2,500 shocks in a treatment normally, you're actually giving tens of thousands of shocks on those tissues, which increase microscopic circulation. They're going to promote mechanotransduction. They're going to increase the ability to create new cell life through fibrocytes and also into your cell osteoblasts. So you're effectively stuffing the area full of new cells. That in itself is what's going to end up with a healing process, which is going to stimulate through the course of shockwaves, I believe, over 6 sessions, over 6 weeks, and you've still got 90 days of collagen and protein synthesis to take place after that. So you're spending about 4 minutes on a treatment, and yet you're giving 4.5 months worth of therapeutic input. It's brilliant.
Wow, that last bit was something I've never heard you talk about, but that is a pretty good summary of number of things, and that we'll talk a bit about later. How the fact that people sell it in a wrong way, which is, you know, they get the idea that if they have shockwave, I certainly see this on some of the courses I teach on, that people think it's going to be some magic fix over 2 to 3 weeks, when people still need to understand that tendons take 3 months to heal. Because I certainly say with the patients I see that, you know, it will be a lucky side effect, which is actually reasonably common, that they get reasonable pain relief quite quickly, but ultimately it's going to ensure that they get really good change over 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, early on you're getting hyperstimulation anesthesia, which is essentially what you get from a TENS machine. And that's where I think the downtime came from, is that people were literally limping in with horrific unfunctionality, and then, you know, a few minutes after the shockwave, they're hopping around like they're going to go and do ballet rambert again, or do hill reps. and actually, that's where you've got to say to them, you know, unfortunately, this probably isn't going to last. You're going to wait a few months to get your full results. And that's where I think the downtime came from. But I think you can cut that to a few hours rather than 2 days. But you're absolutely right. People expect it's going to be this magic fix. It's not a panacea cure-it-all. You don't stop being a great osteopath like you, James, or physio or podiatrist the second you plug this into the wall. It becomes part of the whole package.
Yeah, that's a real. I want that to be a take-home message when I do the courses I teach on, because people have become, like all things. I remember you and I are near enough the same age. Ultrasound about 20 years ago was the panacea. Everyone plugged it in. They didn't know what else to do. They'd stick the ultrasound machine on it and expect amazing things. And then we realised with data years past that it wasn't nearly doing as much as we thought it was doing. But I think that now you and I have seen loads of these manufacturers come out from China and so forth with shockwave machines and dumb the price down to a point where near enough everyone can afford them, whether they've got any good evidence or not. And then everyone just plugs them in, whacks it on the saw bit, and away they go. But just talking about, so in terms of running a practice with this, what are the main conditions that we should be looking out for, that we would be saying, this is the right patient for this type of modality?
So first of all, if you look at where you require things like mechanotransduction, stuff like that, then typically we've always been looking at the chronic tendinopathies. Yeah. So if you want to stick to the central lane of Shockwave, and you want to be on the right side of the NICE guidelines and the right side of the CE mark for the machine, you really are looking at plantar fasciopathy, plantar fasciitis, if you want to go with the more common name, Achilles tendinopathy. Some people put medial tibial stress syndrome or shin splints in there. Definitely patella tendon, high hamstring. You've got trochanteric tendon, and you have got either side of your elbow, and calcific tendonitis of the shoulder. They would be the core things that people would be looking at. I have to say, I'm using it on just about everything. I've been saying on my courses that if it's a radial shockwave, I literally, with minimal training, let my 8-year-old use it on me pretty much anywhere. I think it's that safe. When you're talking about focus shockwave, we have a different conversation. But I'm seeing benefits through using this in a much, much wider scope of practice than just those kind of 7 or 8 main tendons or tissue areas.
Yeah, I think that the key point to it is though the two things I say to people is that, one, the safety, the Pedro database, a meta-analysis of 106 studies, no adverse side effects whatsoever. That's a pretty good number of studies that were included in that, and as you say, for the radial especially. And also the second thing I found, I don't know whether you as well, is that when we look at these persistent pain problems, whether it be tendons, soft tissues, even some joint pain, if they've tried everything else, which they often have done when they've seen us, they're really looking at either a steroid or some injection, or they're looking at surgery.
Yeah.
So, I mean, given that it's...
Most patients these days don't really want surgery, do they? They're kind of very wise to the fact that it's not, they're not going to walk out of the surgery and after the rehab and they're going to be completely better or as good as they were before. Surgery, I think most people now see as a bit of a last-ditch attempt. Injections, how much science have we really got around injections compared to 300 papers a year coming out on shockwave therapy? They're just not keeping up, and I don't think that the long-term outcomes are the same. I mean, even looking at Nedelka's paper in 2014, where he looked at shockwave versus cortisone injection for facet joints, and shockwave ended up with a much better long-term outcome. And you think about how the patient feels having 6 weeks of mild bit of discomfort for 4 or 5 minutes versus someone coming up with a needle. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense that you would clinically reason to put your patient in that invasive situation when the science doesn't point towards the efficacy of the injection.
No, that's really well put, isn't it? And especially I think with the tendinopathies, where PRP, autologous blood, they seem to have been on the wane. And if you look at all the data that compares shockwave with steroid for tendinopathies and plantar fasciopathy, the long-term outcomes are near enough always won by shockwave, and also you don't have any risk of rupture. And the rupture risk of plantar fasciopathy, if you have 2 or 3 injections into there, if you can tolerate the pain of having one, it's not good. I mean, in acute circumstances, we use a steroid in clinic if someone's wants to get out and play golf at the weekend, but we're always telling them that this might not be a long-lasting relief for you, whereas shockwave is and has got that data that says long-term follow-ups up to 12 months. You're doing better than all other options really for those things.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic way of getting your patients to understand. A lot of people don't like the idea of waiting 12 months. Well, look at some conditions like frozen shoulder. Well, just wait 18 months or 3 years and the shoulder might be better. If you're looking at conditions like that where you've got a long time to wait anyway, then why not let's have a really good go at speeding that up using shockwave. It's got some great evidence to support that. Yes, it isn't currently on your NICE guidelines list, but there's some great evidence to fall back on. There's really good studies to show that. So what's the alternative? And it really comes down to, if you're thinking, well, where am I going to place shockwave? You can operate like me, where I'm thinking, what's my reasoning not to give this person Shockwave, or you can think the other way, whereas we're now at a point where we're going to do something that's really quite significant. Why not try Shockwave at that point? And that's like if you like, what I consider 3, 4, 5 years ago, where everyone had to come to you having failed 2 types of conservative management before you use Shockwave. And I, more often than not, I'm getting stuck in with Shockwave nice and early and getting fantastic results.
And what in terms of chronicity of symptoms with your patients, when we started off doing the Assert nationwide follow-up trial that we were doing, and we were always told that we weren't allowed to do it unless they had it 3 months and so forth. I know there's been a little bit of data that's come out in more acute cases, but what do you tend to, when you're teaching your courses, do you tend to say that the patient's got to have it 3 months, 4 months, 6 months? What are your kind of guidelines on that?
So I'm fairly maverick with the use of it. When you're teaching a course, it's a very different situation. So my just go back a stage. My outlook is that somebody really wants to be using radial Shockwave initially before they perhaps move on to getting focus. I think it's much safer. And I think they really should be starting out working on people that have had the condition for, I would argue, 3 months, if they're going to be working on chronic patients, and then off they go. But if someone comes to you with a patellar tendinopathy, when did that start? By its very nature, it's chronic. So it cracks straight on. Yeah, very few people turn up to you with a chronic problem, and that's when you need to set your clock. So in most cases, people are turning up, for example, with a patellar tendinopathy, high hamstring tendinopathy. By the actual fact they're there, it's already chronic. Otherwise, I don't know why they'd be turning up. So you've got to make your clinical judgment. And so what I always say to people is really the bulk of the evidence, although we've got some great stuff coming through with in an acute setting, and I will use it in an acute setting, but when someone says what's happening to the tissues in that acute setting, I've spoken at length with some of the top German guys, and they're saying, well, they believe that it's restoring growth factors, probably moderating some of the bony edema in the area, but this is what we think's happening. So if you are going to teach a course, you've got to be telling people what you know as best as your ability is happening, and therefore wait till it's chronic. Your HCPC or whatever, the different denominations of it, you are a allied health professional, and you would have to make the same clinical reasoning about what you're going to do with that tendinopathy, whether it be acute or chronic, and whether you apply Shockwave, that's just part of your armoury. But you yourself have to make a decision about whether it's chronic or not, and that would always come from you. And I would say, if you want to stay in the safe zone, which I recommend to people on my course, if you know it's chronic, if you believe it's chronic, you stay there, and that's when you bring out Shockwave, if your patient consents to have it.
Yeah, I think that all sounds completely reasonable, actually. I mean, that's pretty much what I go along with as well, and I know that some of the other people that teach, they say a similar sort of thing. I've certainly been inclined to say that, you might have only had it for 6 weeks, but if we look back at your history, you've always come in with some element of lower extremity, this, that, and the other. It's probably been bumbling around in the background.
Yeah.
When you said at the start of this that you suggested that people have about is also, how many treatment sessions should I be giving for certain conditions? And you came straight in with 6 earlier on. Do you on the courses do you say that across the board everyone needs 6, or do you change that number depending on how long they've had it or for what condition they have?
No, I like people to go away with stuff they can remember. Listen, we know that no harm's going to come from this. I think if you've got a package that offers 6, let's just look at some of the things. First of all, a lot of the early research is saying 3 sessions, and they have based a lot of the protocols on that early research. There's now stuff coming out with 4 sessions, 5 sessions, 6 sessions. People like Aviva and Cigna kind of automatically give you 6 sessions. Bupa even give you 3, and you can apply for another 3. The truth is we don't know what the optimum number is, but there's some recent information to show that when you first start Shockwave, so week 1, you actually have an increase in substance P, and that is reduced significantly by week 6. So what I was finding anecdotally is that people were seeming to have a big breakthrough in terms of their reduction in pain and function around the 6-week mark. So because we can't decide whether it should be 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever. I've stuck with 6 for the last 3 years now, and my results have been significantly improved. Now, next week, so a week tomorrow, I'll fly out to Beijing to go to the International Society for Medical Shockwave Treatment, and we're getting something in the region of 20 lectures a day there. They're only 15 minutes long, but they're long days. And this is one of the questions I really hope to ask and really try to glean from a mass of international understanding about what they think this should be. Because all the science I look at, and I'm sure you're the same, James, we don't know. We don't know what the right amount is. All I know is that across all the meta-analysis, it seems to be telling us that it's 82% success rate with Shockwave across all of those wonderful papers. And I think by doing a 6-session protocol, that my audit is at least on par with that, if not improved on it. So one of the things that I'm presenting there is my protocol for osteoarthritis of the knee, and that is 6 sessions. Actually 5,000 shocks per treatment as well, not 2,500. So I want to see how well that's accepted there.
Are you, just as a side note, are you using radial with that, Paul?
Combined, radial and focus.
Okay. At the start of this, one of the main aims of these podcasts was to demystify a bit of what Shockwave is and try and simplify it. Can you just give us in 30 seconds your radial focused? I'm going to ask everyone for this actually when they come on.
Yeah.
30 seconds radial focused differences and what we should think we should be using it for.
I can probably do it in 10 seconds. Radial is like a light bulb, and focus is like a laser pointer. So the light bulb, the strongest signal is emitted around the bulb, and it gets weaker and weaker as a half-life. But it's going everywhere. You're showering everywhere in with Shockwave. The focus is like a laser pointer, and where that red dot hits on those affected tissues is where the treatment is taking place, basically missing out everything before it.
That's nicely impressive. I like, because I'm in Suffolk and lots of people shoot around here. I use shotgun versus air rifle or something like that. Yeah. And there's not many people that have got focused, I know, because it's a little bit more expensive. But I think you and I both agree, along with other people that got them, that combination treatments tend to be where everyone is going who's an expert in this field. But we'll come.
I think science will take that to be the gold standard.
Yeah.
In the next couple of years. But I also think that people that are getting on board now I reckon, will still be considered to be early adopters, even with radial. In this country, not in places like Germany and Switzerland, but in this country, getting your first radial machine, I still would probably just about put you in the early adopter. But if you really wanted to be beating everyone else to the gatepost, then you go and get yourself a focused machine within 6 months of using radial, and you really would be ahead of the curve. And using both together, I think that will be the gold standard going forwards. And I also think that within 5 years that you'll hear shockwave therapy for just about every medical condition that you can reasonably think of, I think would be involved in the management of those things.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way that the trend is going. It's just that when we meet together with people that are from Europe, the popularity of it and the acceptance of it is way more than it is in Britain. We're just a little bit, I don't know. I mean, quite rightly, you've got to be a little bit cynical about everything that's supposed to be a panacea. But I don't know about. In 20 years of doing what I've been doing, I've never plugged a machine in. I've never used any technology before. I've used, I'm an osteopath, use hands-on. But when I got involved in this, I have to say, and now my physiotherapist is here in clinic. And what other electrotherapy machines do you use, and where do you see this in terms of hierarchy of effectiveness?
I see it as absolutely the top of the hierarchy of the effectiveness. I think the research shows that. I've just started using high-powered laser in conjunction with Shockwave, so actually heating the tissues up directly after giving Shockwave, and I'd love to come back in 6 months and tell you what the results of that are. But that's it. I've steered clear of just about everything else that plugs into the wall other than the treadmill for the entirety of my career. And it actually, name drop bingo and everything, but it took Paul Hobrough and Steve Cram, who I was treating, to say to me, we're getting this, look, why aren't you providing it? And at that time, I was an absolute naysayer, and I'd read all the oomph or the research that was out that was easily accessible, that basically we were knocking out in the kind of early 2000s, which said that Shockwave didn't work. And I think, James, you were at the same thing at the Royal College of Surgeons, where Professor Rompe from Germany, one of the talismans of this, was saying that he actually now has a negative view of the British Medical Journal because of that sort of stuff it was printing. And it really gave the Germans, who were getting vastly different results in terms of efficacy, they just looked at the BMJ and went, well, who's doing this? Where are they getting these results from? And they stopped looking at us. And that was a big, that 10-year window is where we really fell behind. And we became, the whole country is going, it doesn't work, it's just another ultrasound or whatever. And now people like yourself and me and other people that we know and work with closely are really driving it forwards. And I think quite rightly, we're now noticing that courses that used to have 4 or 5 people on, and now, you're getting 20, 30, 40 people turning up to the course. It's actually hard to teach in many ways, but it just shows you how the bubble is exploding. And you're still getting some people on those courses that are sitting at the back going, I'm not sure about this, I'm going to ask some tricky questions. And great, because let's have the discussion. Let's get it out in the open, because we've got so much data now which shows the efficacy. I'm hoping that within 12 to 18 months, those conversations will be gone. But I'm still very happy to have them to get anyone that's thinking about this to really open their eyes to it and to understand what's going on. Because if there's still people walking around saying the world's flat, then we need to explain to them actually it's round, and we've known that for a while.
It's you are the king of metaphors. That's well described. I think that's pretty much all the things I was thinking about talking about today. But I think that we'll probably have to get you back on at some point, especially with the laser stuff.
You did say about selling it as well.
Yes.
Which is my this is one of my, I think, massive things, is that you have to charge for this. I'm vehemently against people spending 10, 15, 20 grand on equipment and then just assuming that because they've had a life in the NHS or whatever, that they have to give this away for free.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that there's a variety of price points. I charge $399 for 6 sessions. I think that's, cutting somewhere through the middle. And I charge for my therapeutic input on top. So it's an additional £66.50 on top of whatever I charge. I charge £69 times. So, the price builds up. And I don't think you can have someone walk into your clinic and say, my Achilles is really hurting and it's been like this for a long time and I'm willing to do anything to get it better. They might have come in thinking they're going to spend 50, 60 quid, and suddenly I'm hitting them with a bill that's in excess of 800. So it's how you position it and how you explain it. I said right at the beginning, you need to get your 60-second pitch about what Shockwave is so that you can tell it quickly and you're not going off talking about toll-like receptor 3 and strings and nucleotides, because people don't want to know that. What you need to be doing is explaining to them what it's going to do for them. And again, you love a metaphor and analogy, but people don't buy drills, they buy a hole in the wall. So don't tell them how good your drill is. Explain to them that you're going to create this hole in the wall and they can hang their picture. So your Achilles tendinopathy has an 82% chance of getting better if we include Shockwave as part of our package. Great. But tell them, because they need to get by, and say to them, I can give you some loading exercise, you can go away and try and do those. Only 7% of people will go and do all their exercises, so we've got a 93% failure rate on that. Second of all, you can have, good old-fashioned therapy, osteopathy, physio, whatever your domination is. And thirdly, you can have all of that plus Shockwave on top. But don't make a decision now. Jump on the couch, let me do an assessment, let me start the therapy, and 10 minutes before the end, when you've asked all your questions about Shockwave, we'll figure out whether you want to go for it or not. Give them a chance to have a bit of time to make a decision and then decide whether they want to make that sale. And what you'll find is that the single female patient will make a decision like that. The single male patient might make the decision by the end of it. The married female will make a decision like this, and the married male needs to go through his head and consider how he's going to justify it to his wife when he gets home and go against her weekend in Ibiza or whatever and decide he's got enough justification. But you need to give them 20 minutes or so to do that. And so that is the way. If you want people to buy into it, don't just go, yeah, great, we're going to do Shockwave, but I'm going to charge you 800 quid, because they're all going to say no. So learn how to take your patient on a journey from where you want them to be and where they thought they were going to be, and you've got to close that gap by giving them think time.
Wow, I'm trying to take all that on board, especially when you went from stem cells to Ibiza in the space of 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It's cracking.
I wasn't going to mention this, but we may as well, because people always ask this, and there's no point getting, you can't get around it. But at some point during the lectures I give, everyone's always like, what machine should I buy? Where, and my general response, I don't know whether you'd agree with this. There's two main companies out there that are sort of like the BMW and Mercedes of Shockwave, and it's not necessarily that they're the only ones that create cavitation and do what they're supposed to do, but it is to me anyway, that if you walked into any major hospital across Europe or any major clinic, and they pretty much would have a Storz or Chattanooga device that use Storz,
yes,
or an EMS which is known as Swiss dollar cast. Do you give similar sort of advice out? Because I think the price points are reasonably the same, which is sort of somewhere 6,000 to 10,000 for a radial device, but I do know that there's lots of companies out there now selling them for £2,500-3,000. What do you give as advice on all of that in trying to be an unbiased, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've specifically stuck in a position where I teach for the company I work for, and I, as an HCPC registered physiotherapist, I don't want to get involved in if someone buys a machine that in somehow that changes my lifestyle. So I have chosen to work with companies that produce or sell rather the Storz-based equipment, and that's Venn Healthcare and the Chattanooga devices from DJO, because they are spending in excess of 5 million a year in Storz on research and development. They're already ahead of the new legislation that comes in, which will decide whether a machine can be used or not legally. And you are covered as a healthcare practitioner, whichever form you are, by the fact that those machines comply to absolutely everything that they need to comply with. And without getting into detail, then you just know that they comply. EMS, I believe, is a very good machine. It's not one that I've ever used before or touched. I have understood and worked closely with the Storz brand for a number of years, and I feel very, very confident with them, having visited their factory. I know the people that work there, and yet however many they sell does not influence my life one iota. So I don't have to sit here and try and sell one machine in favour of the other. I merely teach to a machine that I fully understand that it's going to be giving Shockwave on its millionth shock in exactly the same way as it does on its first shock when you get the machine. I think that there are some very cheap alternatives coming out, and if I'm going to use Panda, I don't think that they can offer you the same assurances. And if you buy right, you buy once. And so there is a reason that these machines are holding their value, and there's a reason that you never see a Storz-based product on the second-hand market, because of the exact reasons that I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't want to, sit here and be like, I'm championing this brand. It's that, I'm saying about a lot of things that I have in my life, where I would want to buy something that I know I had lots of confidence in, and you are making a big purchase, and yes, £2,500-3,000 is less than say 7 to 10, but if I've got to spend that 3 times, it all ends up being the same. And if I'm not getting the clinical results, I've got to be able to go to bed at night knowing that I think my brand of physio is right up there. I charge double everyone in my area here in Northumberland, and my books are full. I know that what we do is good. I feel very happy with what we do, and I feel very happy with the machine choices I've made, and I've been prepared to spend an appropriate amount of money to get something that does smack of quality.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. That's why I describe them. They are the Mercedes and BMW of what I know to be good research-led manufacturers, and of course people can go off and they can get whatever they want, but the other thing, of course, as we both know, is that we all kind of know each other in our profession of doing Shockwave, and we all use one machine or the other. And if someone sends me an email and says, what do you think I should do with this, that and the other, and if it's one of those machines, I have no idea of the answer, but we kind of know where we are with the Storts, or indeed those guys know what they're doing with an EMS. So look, I thought about this being 20 minutes. I think I'm going to guess that this is not far off. So we're going to call it to a close there. And I think we got everything covered, and it's been really useful. I hope other people listening will get a good summary of it as a start point of what Shockwave therapy can offer. And we'll get you back on at some point to discuss particular conditions, I think, which people always want to know about. But thanks for your time today, Paul. It's been really good.
No problem. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Paul. Bye.